We're building
bangkitan pariwisata.
Making tourism more sustainable in the future. So what I would like to say actually in my presentation is we have to work together, and just now all of the speakers agree that we have to involve all of the stakeholders to work hand in hand, the community, the government, decision makers, private sectors, all of us, we have to work together, and it cannot be done segregated. We have to work together. It cannot be done only by Bali, by Indonesia, or by Europe, or by only parts of the world, because tourism is a global phenomenon, and we have to work together. But I'm going to share a very short ideas about resilience as a key element of global tourism sustainability. And we know nowadays a lot of dialectica focusing on the resilient tourism, especially after the pandemic COVID-19. We are not talking only about the recovery, but we are talking also about how we can develop a resilient tourism. Next. Well, when we are talking about resilient, the word resilient is actually coming from Latin resilientum. It means that we are rebounding, we are recovering from adversarial situation. So we try to recover, and then after recovering, we need to adapt and develop an elastic system in order we can develop as resilient tourism. So, because when we have a tragedy, when we have a disaster, when we have a catastrophe, it must be repeated, and it must be beyond the control of the human being. So that's why we need to develop a strategy how to make, especially tourism, into a resilient business, to make it more sustainable and endure in terms of the catastrophe. Next. Resilient theory actually exposed by Richard Butler in 2017. Also, they said the theory is associated with the responsibility and commitment of all relevant stakeholders. So when we are talking about resilient, we are not talking pragmatically only to a certain sector, only to a certain group of people, but we have to associate, we have to attract participation of all stakeholders, private sectors, government, community, and all stakeholders involved in tourism business. Next. When we are talking about resilience, we are talking about resistance. How we are able to resist a bad impact of the disaster. But that is not easy. And then how we can revive from a downstream situations, and we try to rebound and revive from a bad situation, or let us say from economic turn-down situation. And then we need to adapt our business into the new situation. And of course, we need to develop a transformation in facing future threat. So the threat is always there, but the problem now is how we can develop a strategy to make the company, especially tourism company, resistant and be able to revive, adapt in a new situation, and we have to transform our system, especially when we are facing the future threat. Next. Well, sustainability versus resilient. When we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about related change, how the tourism able to survive and have positive impact on the environment, social culture, and local economy. So when we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about there's three trickle down. But when we are talking about resilience, we are talking about a new construct of a company's ability to adapt to situation, to the environment. How can the tourism industry adapt and adjust with the circumstances so that it is become tough, strong, and able to control, on to recover, and to get out from the adversarial situation. Next. When we are talking about recovery and resilience, normally we are talking about whether we are going to back to the business as usual. And when we are going back to the business as usual, we are talking about status quo. So we are going to do the same thing after the disaster. We are going to do the same thing after the catastrophe. But what we are looking for is this blue ocean phenomenon. We are talking about equitable, resilient, and sustainable future. So we are talking about a transformation and change, and try to make all of the tourism stakeholders to adapt and develop elastic system and strategy in order to be able to mitigate and also to redevelop and also to reframe the business after the catastrophe, especially after the pandemic COVID-19. Next. We are talking about resilience. We are talking about 5 elements. The first thing is we are talking about identifying the possible risks. If there is a catastrophe, if there is bad event, if there's political problem, for example, if there's natural disaster, health problem, we try to identify the possible risks that might happen in the tourism sector. So this identification is very important. We try to see the ontological fact, phenomenon, what will happen if there is a disaster. And then we need to develop a strategic plan and develop a scale of priority. What is our scale of priority when there is a disaster? What we need to do, what we need to save first. Because UNWTO and we are all thinking people first. So we have to focus to save and bring people on the front line as the priority of our strategy. But then the third one is mitigation and preparedness. So when the disaster comes, we have to be able to mitigate and we have to be prepared to respond the disaster by using the identification that we made previously, by using the strategic development, and then when the disaster comes, we have to respond and we have to be able to recover from this strategy and how then tourism respond to the disaster and how to develop inclusive recovery strategy, bringing all stakeholders in, and we are working together hand in hand, locally, nationally, and globally. And the last one is, this is what we are talking about. We need to develop elastic, adaptive, and transformative long-term resilience strategy. So number 5, actually, we are talking about if the disaster reoccur in the future, we already have a system that might respond, that we can minimize the negative impact of the disaster or tragedy or catastrophe. Next. Will be my last slide. The next one, please. Okay, this is my last slide. Well, resilient tourism, a global strategy, is to renew political commitment. We need to invoke and bring in the government. We bring all of the international convention upon international board of governors to work together, and we all work together to be a driver of more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient tourism, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. And the next one is we have to strengthen the dialogue among the government, the private sector, local communities, and other stakeholders. We work hand in hand, educational institutions, government sectors, private companies. We have to work together locally, nationally, and of course globally. Well, I think that is the short thing that I would like to share with the committees and also with the audience this afternoon. And of course, we hope after this there will be some small discussion if you would like to enrich our vision about this. Thank you very much.